In 2026, companies are spending billions on AI. New AI tools are launching every month. And everyone wants to become an AI engineer. But here's something most people don't realize. Before an AI model can answer a question, before a dashboard can show a report, before a business can make a decision, the data has to come from somewhere. And in many companies, that data is scattered across dozens of different systems. Customer information lives in one place. Sales data lives somewhere else. Marketing data lives somewhere completely different. If nobody organizes that information, nothing works. Not the dashboards, not the analytics, and definitely not the AI. That's where data engineers come in. They're the people who collect, clean, organize, and move data across an entire company. And without them, most modern businesses would be operating blind. So in this video, you'll experience life at every level of a data engineer, from exploring your first dataset to building the massive data systems that power AI, analytics, and business decisions. By the end, you'll understand exactly what data engineers do and why they've become one of the most important roles in modern technology. Level 1. Data Explorer. You're curious about data, but you've never worked with it professionally before. At this level, data feels like one of those words everyone uses, but nobody really explains. You hear people talking about big data, analytics, machine learning, dashboards, and AI, but you're still trying to figure out what data actually means in the real world. Then you start noticing something interesting. Every time someone buys a product, clicks a website, watches a video, uses an app, or makes a payment, data is being created, and companies collect all of it. Not because they enjoy collecting information, because that information helps them understand what's happening inside their business. For example, an online store wants to know which products are selling, which customers spend the most money, why are some people leaving without buying anything. The answers already exist, hidden inside the data. And for the first time, you realize that data isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a record of what people, customers, and businesses are actually doing. Most of your time is spent exploring datasets, looking at reports, learning basic SQL, and trying to understand how businesses turn information into decisions. Your biggest challenge isn't technology. It's learning how to think with data. Because data rarely gives you answers directly. It gives you clues. And it's your job to figure out what those clues mean. At this stage, you're not building systems. You're learning how modern businesses see the world through data. And once you understand that, you start asking a bigger question. If companies are collecting all this information, who organizes it? And that's what takes you to level 2. Level 2, Data Problem Solver. You've stopped looking at data. Now you're using it to answer real questions. At this level, people start coming to you with problems. Not technical problems. Business problems. Questions like, why did sales suddenly drop last month? Which marketing campaign brought the most customers? Why are users leaving the website before making a purchase? And for the first time, you realize something important. Most companies already have the answers. They just don't know where to find them. The answers are buried inside millions of rows of data. So your job is to dig through that information and turn it into something useful. Imagine a company notices that revenue is falling. One manager blames the product. Another blames marketing. Someone else blames the economy. Everyone has an opinion. But data doesn't care about opinions. Data only cares about what actually happened. So you start investigating. You compare numbers. Look for patterns. Connect information from different sources. And eventually, you discover the real reason. Maybe customers are abandoning their carts before checkout. Maybe a marketing campaign stopped working. Maybe a website update created a problem nobody noticed. For the first time, you're helping businesses make decisions based on evidence instead of guesses. And that's where your value starts growing. But then you run into a frustrating problem. The data is a mess. Customer information is stored in one system. Sales data is stored somewhere else. Marketing data lives in a completely different platform. And sometimes the numbers don't even match. You spend almost as much time cleaning data as analyzing it. That's when you discover a surprising truth. The hardest part isn't finding answers. The hardest part is getting reliable data in the first place. And once you realize that, you stop asking, how do I analyze data? And start asking, who organizes all this chaos? And that's what takes you to level 3. Level 3, Data Pipeline Builder. You're no longer just finding answers in data. Now you're responsible for moving data. And this is where you discover something that surprises almost everyone. Most companies don't have a data problem. They have a data chaos problem. Customer information lives in one system. Sales data lives in another. Website activity is stored somewhere else. Marketing platforms have their own data. And finance teams have another set of numbers entirely. Everyone wants insights. But nobody is looking at the same information. Imagine asking 5 departments the same question. How many customers do we have? And getting 5 different answers. It happens more often than you'd think. That's where you come in. Instead of manually collecting data every day, you start building systems that do it automatically. These systems continuously collect information from different sources, clean it, organize it, and move it into one place where everyone can access it. For example, when a customer places an order, that information might need to travel through multiple systems before it appears in a company dashboard. Your job is to make sure that journey happens smoothly, every day, without anyone having to think about it. This is what people mean when they talk about data pipelines. Think of them like highways for information. They move data from where it's created to where it's needed. And suddenly, you realize something important. The dashboard isn't the hard part. The report isn't the hard part. Getting accurate data to those systems is the hard part. Your day is spent connecting systems, cleaning messy information, fixing broken data flows, and making sure information arrives at the right place at the right time. The biggest challenge? Data breaks all the time. A company changes a form. A website gets updated. A software tool changes its structure. And suddenly, information stops flowing correctly. One small problem can create bad reports, wrong numbers, and confuse teams across the entire business. That's when you learn a lesson every data engineer eventually learns. Bad data moves faster than good data, and fixing it is usually your job. But when everything works, something amazing happens. Teams stop arguing about numbers. Managers trust their reports. Executives can make decisions faster. And the business starts running more smoothly. For the first time, you're not just analyzing information. You're building infrastructure. And that's what takes you to Level 4, Data Engineer. Level 4, Data Engineer. By now, data is flowing through almost every part of the company. Sales teams depend on it. Marketing teams depend on it. Executives depend on it. And keeping that information reliable has become your responsibility. At this level, something changes. People stop seeing data as spreadsheets and reports, and start seeing it as infrastructure. Just like a company needs electricity, internet, and servers to operate, it also needs reliable data. Because without reliable data, nobody knows what's happening. Not the marketing team, not the sales team, not the executives, and definitely not the AI systems. Your day starts with monitoring data systems that are constantly moving information across the company. Thousands, millions, sometimes billions of records are flowing through systems you've built. Most days, nobody notices your work. And honestly, that's usually a good sign. Because when a data engineer is doing their job well, everything simply works. Reports update. Dashboards refresh. Analytics teams get their data. And business leaders make decisions without ever thinking about where the information came from. But then something breaks. And that's when everyone suddenly notices. A dashboard shows the wrong numbers. A report fails to update. A department starts making decisions based on incomplete information. And now the entire company is waiting for answers. This is why data engineering is much less about building things, and much more about keeping things reliable. Your day is spent monitoring systems, investigating failures, fixing broken pipelines, improving performance, and making sure data arrives accurately and on time. And here's something many people outside the industry don't realize. The hardest part of data engineering isn't moving data. It's moving data correctly. Because bad data is often more dangerous than no data at all. If a report is missing, people know something is wrong. But if the report looks normal while showing incorrect numbers, people might make important decisions based on bad information. And that can become extremely expensive. That's why trust becomes one of your biggest responsibilities. Not just storing data, not just moving data, making sure people can trust it. And this is where many data engineers discover an important truth. Most companies don't lose money because they lack data. They lose money because they trust the wrong data. Once you understand that, your role starts changing. You're no longer just connecting systems. You're becoming responsible for the quality, reliability, and accuracy of information across the business. And that responsibility grows quickly. Because bigger companies create a bigger problem. More customers, more products, more transactions, more data. And that's exactly what takes you to level 5. Level 5, Senior Data Engineer. You're no longer responsible for a few pipelines. You're responsible for systems that entire businesses rely on every single day. At this level, the amount of data you're dealing with becomes enormous. Millions of customer interactions, millions of transactions, millions of website events. And every day, that number keeps growing. A small startup might survive if a report is delayed for a few hours. A large company can't. Because when data stops moving, decisions stop moving too. And that's why your responsibilities change. You're no longer asking, can we build this? You're asking, can this system handle 10 times more data next year? For the first time, you're constantly thinking about scale. A pipeline that works perfectly with 1,000 records might completely fail when processing hundreds of millions. A query that runs in seconds today could take hours tomorrow. A small design mistake can become a massive problem as the company grows. So your day is spent optimizing systems, improving performance, reducing costs, and making sure everything continues running smoothly as data volumes explode. But here's what makes this level different. The technical challenge isn't the hardest part anymore. The business impact is. Imagine an executive dashboard showing the wrong revenue numbers, or a forecasting model using incomplete data, or a company making decisions based on inaccurate reports. Suddenly, a data issue isn't just a technical issue. It's a business problem, and sometimes a very expensive one. That's why many senior data engineers spend just as much time preventing problems as solving them. Because once bad data spreads through a company, fixing the damage becomes much harder. And this is where many people discover a surprising truth. Data engineering isn't really about data. It's about trust. Every report, every dashboard, every metric, every business decision depends on whether people trust the information they're seeing. And helping build that trust becomes one of your most important responsibilities. At this stage, other engineers start asking for your advice. Teams depend on your systems. And leadership starts paying attention because they understand how much of the business relies on reliable data. But then you notice another problem. Even when the data is accurate, people still interpret it differently. Different teams calculate metrics differently. Different dashboards tell different stories. And suddenly, everyone is working from a different version of reality. That's when you realize that moving data isn't enough. People need a consistent way to understand it. And that's what takes you to level 6, Analytics Engineer. Level 6, Analytics Engineer. You've spent years making sure data is accurate. Now you're making sure people actually understand it. At this level, you discover something surprising. Having good data doesn't automatically lead to good decisions. Because different teams often look at the same data and reach completely different conclusions. Marketing has one dashboard. Sales has another. Finance has a third. Everyone is looking at numbers. But nobody is looking at the same story. Imagine a meeting where one team says revenue is growing. Another says it's falling. And a third team says it's flat. How is that possible? Because everyone is calculating things differently. And suddenly, the biggest problem isn't bad data. It's inconsistent data. Data doesn't create decisions. Shared understanding creates decisions. That's where you come in. Your job is to create a single source of truth for the entire company. Instead of every team defining metrics their own way, you build systems that ensure everyone measures things consistently. What exactly counts as an active customer? What counts as revenue? What counts as a conversion? Questions like these sound simple, until hundreds of people start using different answers. Your day is spent working with both technical teams and business teams. One moment you're talking to engineers about data models. The next moment you're helping executives understand company performance. You're becoming a translator between business and technology. And this is where your impact grows dramatically. Because most executives don't care how data is collected. They care whether they can trust the numbers in front of them. When your work is done well, meetings become shorter. Decisions become faster. And entire teams stop arguing about which numbers are correct. For the first time, you're not just helping people access data. You're helping people understand reality. And that's far more valuable than most people realize. But eventually, another challenge appears. The company keeps growing. More teams, more products, more customers, more systems. And now the question isn't, how should we measure things? The question becomes, how should this entire data ecosystem be designed? Because a company isn't running on dozens of datasets anymore. It's running on thousands. And that's what takes you to level 7. Level 7, Data Architect. By now, the company has grown far beyond what a few pipelines and dashboards can handle. New products are launching. New teams are being created. More customers are joining. AI systems are consuming more data than ever. And every month, the complexity keeps increasing. At this stage, the challenge isn't collecting data. The challenge is organizing an entire company's information in a way that still makes sense years later. That's where you come in. Before a new product launches, teams want your input. Before a new AI initiative begins, teams want your input. Before major systems are redesigned, teams want your input. Because every decision now affects dozens of other systems across the company. Your day is spent thinking about questions most people never consider. Where should data live? Who should have access to it? How should information move between teams? How can AI systems, analytics platforms, business applications, and future products all work together without creating chaos? You're designing the rules that allow thousands of pieces of information to move through the company efficiently. And this is where your mindset changes completely. Earlier in your career, you were focused on today's problems. Now you're thinking about problems the company might face 3, 5, or even 10 years from now. Because architecture decisions last a long time. A shortcut that saves a few weeks today can create years of headaches later. And a smart decision today can save thousands of engineering hours in the future. The biggest challenge? Technology changes constantly. New AI models appear. New tools become popular. New business requirements show up every year. But the foundation you design still needs to support all of them. That's why great data architects don't build systems around trends. They build systems around principles that can survive change. And when it's done well, something incredible happens. Teams move faster. New products launch faster. AI projects become easier. Engineers spend less time fixing problems and more time building useful things. Most people inside the company will never notice the architecture. They'll only notice that everything seems to work. And that's usually the sign of great architecture. Because when the foundation is strong, growth feels easy. When the foundation is weak, every new project becomes a struggle. At this point, you're no longer responsible for a pipeline, or a dashboard, or even a department. You're helping design how information flows through an entire organization. But eventually, you realize something even bigger. Data infrastructure isn't the final goal. The real goal is helping companies make smarter decisions, build better products, and create more intelligent systems. And that's what takes you to level 8. Level 8. AI and Data Infrastructure Leader. In 2026, almost every company wants to become an AI company. They want smarter products, smarter recommendations, smarter forecasts, smarter decisions. And from the outside, it looks like AI is doing all the work. But by now, you've learned something most people never realize. AI is only as good as the data behind it. An AI model can't learn from data that doesn't exist. It can't make decisions using data it can't access. And it certainly can't produce reliable results if the underlying information is incomplete, outdated, or wrong. That's why at this level, your responsibility extends far beyond data pipelines and dashboards. You're helping build the foundation that powers an organization's intelligence. The systems you oversee feed information into analytics platforms, machine learning models, AI agents, recommendation engines, forecasting systems, and executive decision-making tools. A single piece of data might be used by dozens of different systems across the company, and every one of them depends on that data being available, accurate, and trustworthy. Your day is no longer spent fixing individual problems. You're focused on strategy. How should the company prepare for future AI initiatives? How should data be governed? How can information remain secure while still being useful? How can thousands of employees and hundreds of systems work from the same trusted foundation? The biggest challenge? The company's demand for data never stops growing. Every new product needs data. Every new AI project needs data. Every new decision depends on data. And you're responsible for making sure the organization can continue scaling without losing trust in the information that powers everything. At this level, you start seeing the complete picture. The AI engineer builds the model. The data scientist finds patterns. The analyst creates insights. The business leader makes decisions. But none of them can do their jobs if the data isn't there. But all of them depend on one thing: reliable data. And that's why modern companies are investing so heavily in data infrastructure. Because before a company can build intelligence, it needs information. Before it can automate decisions, it needs trustworthy data. And before AI can create value, someone has to make sure the right data reaches the right place at the right time. That's the responsibility you've spent your entire career building toward. You've gone from exploring datasets, to answering business questions, to building pipelines, to creating reliable infrastructure, to designing company-wide data ecosystems. And now, you're helping power the systems that drive modern business and AI itself. And that's the life at every level of a data engineer. And here's the reality. When people talk about the future of technology, they usually talk about AI. But the companies winning with AI aren't the ones with the most models. They're the ones with the best data. The tools will change. The platforms will evolve. And today's AI systems will eventually be replaced by something better. But one thing won't change. Businesses will always need reliable information to make decisions. Because before you can build intelligence, you need data. And behind that data, there's usually a data engineer. So the question is, what level are you on today? And where do you want to be next year?